It began with a silence so heavy, you could almost hear the heartbeat of the Vatican itself. This was no ordinary day in Rome, not after what had just unfolded. A crowd of over 1 million young souls had filled St. Peter's Square only days before, their voices rising like incense in the jubilee of youth. Pope Leo XIV's words still lingered in the air. You are the sign that a different world is possible. A message that cut through the divisions of nations, through the shadows of war in Gaza and Ukraine, and reached straight into the trembling hearts of the faithful. But today, it was not the Pope's voice the world was waiting to hear. It was his closest ally. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, the man whose hands had touched the Church at its most fragile points, the man who just weeks ago had been elevated by Leo, first himself, to the role of Cardinal Bishop of Albano. The man who had been silent while rumors swirled through Vatican corridors like incense smoke in a restless wind. And then, it happened. In a hall lit by the golden glow of ancient chandeliers, before a gathering of cardinals whose faces were carved with the weight of centuries, Cardinal Tagle stood. His eyes moved slowly over the room, resting on each crimson-clad brother, some eager, some wary, some already knowing. The air was so thick, you could almost feel the marble beneath your feet vibrate. They had all heard whispers that the Pope's push for humility and unity was shaking ancient foundations. Whispers that this papacy would bring changes unseen since the Council of Trent. Whispers of coming canonizations, of global health missions, of a church stepping into the storms of the world rather than hiding from them. And through it all, Tagle had remained silent. Until now, he spoke not as a politician, nor as a man seeking favor, but as a witness. He told of standing beside Pope Leo XIV at the Jubilee, seeing tears on the faces of youth from every nation, of the Pope's hands trembling as he spoke of peace, knowing the weight of those words in a world drunk on division. He spoke of Carlo Acutis's upcoming canonization and the miraculous hope it was already sparking in the digital age. He told of the Pope's August prayer, not a political statement, but a cry for mutual coexistence in a time when even the Church itself risked tearing apart. But then he paused. Every cardinal in that chamber leaned forward, and with a voice that did not shake, Tagle revealed the part no one expected, that the Pope had confided to him a vision that had come during prayer, a vision of the Church's future, and of a choice that would soon divide not just the Vatican, but the entire Catholic world. Gasps echoed through the hall. Some cardinals looked down, others locked eyes in silent calculation. Outside, the bells of St. Peter's rang, not for Mass, but as if marking the moment heaven itself had just placed a stone in history's river. And yet, Tagle's voice grew stronger. "This," he said, "is not the hour to run from the storm. This is the hour to walk into it, together." The chamber fell silent again. But this silence was different. This was the silence before the first step into something that could change everything. And somewhere, beyond the walls of the Apostolic Palace, the faithful waited, breathless, for what would come next. The vision. Cardinal Tagle's voice trembled not from fear, but from the sheer weight of what he was about to reveal. The marble walls seemed to close in as he described it, the night Pope Leo XIV knelt alone before the Blessed Sacrament, deep inside the Apostolic Palace. A night when the candles burned low, and the silence was pierced only by the faint toll of a distant bell. In that stillness, Leo saw it. A sky torn in two, one side blazing with golden light, the other shrouded in a storm so black it swallowed the stars. And in the middle, the Church, the bride of Christ, clothed in white, but with her garments torn, her veil stained with the dust of the world. She was reaching out, calling for help, and behind her, the shadows moved. Shadows, in the shape of men. Shadows wearing the robes of priests, bishops, even cardinals. They whispered in the darkness, their words weaving a net meant to pull her away from her bridegroom. Their eyes glistened, not with tears of repentance, but with the cold fire of ambition. Tagle's voice broke as he told the cardinals. The Holy Father saw that the storm was not only outside the walls of the Vatican, it was inside. Some shifted uneasily in their seats, others clenched their rosaries, because every man in that room knew the vision was not just a dream. The factions were real, the tensions were growing, the battle lines, though unspoken, had already been drawn. Leo's vision had not ended there. From the heavens, Christ himself appeared, not in triumph, but in sorrow. His sacred heart blazed like a furnace, yet his eyes were fixed on his bride with a love so deep it could break stone. He spoke only 7 words: "Purify my church, or I will." The weight of those words fell on Tagle like a hammer. And now, that weight was being placed upon the shoulders of every cardinal in the room. A murmur spread, some in awe, some in disbelief. But before anyone could speak, Tagle continued. He revealed that Leo had confided a second part to the vision, a sign that would mark the beginning of this purification. It would come suddenly without warning, during a great gathering of the faithful. The Pope had not said when, he had only said, soon. And then, the twist that made the blood run cold in every man present. Tagle said the Pope had written a sealed letter, one that would only be opened if the sign appeared. In it were instructions that would determine the next century of the Church, instructions that could either unite the bride of Christ or lead to the most devastating schism since the Reformation. Every cardinal's eyes darted to one another. Who had the letter? Where was it hidden? Was this a warning or a test? Outside, the skies above Rome began to darken, not with rain, but with the kind of heavy, unnatural gloom that makes you feel heaven itself is watching. In the distance, the bells of St. Peter's began to toll again, slowly, deliberately, as if counting down to something unseen. And in that moment, the silence inside the Vatican became more terrifying than thunder. It came on a day no one expected. The skies above Rome had been clear that morning, the bells ringing joyfully for the closing ceremonies of the Jubilee of Youth. Over 1 million faithful filled St. Peter's Square, their voices like a living sea of prayer and song. Flags from every nation waved under the sunlight. Pilgrims wept as Pope Leo XIV stepped onto the balcony, his white robes gleaming against the deep blue sky. And then, without warning, the air changed. It was not wind. It was not rain. It was something unseen. A sudden heaviness that seemed to press on every heart. Conversations faltered. Instruments stilled. Even the pigeons that circled the basilica froze mid-flight, as if held in place by an invisible hand. The Pope's voice echoed over the square. But just as he spoke the words, "Christ is our peace," a sound tore through the air, not from the choir, not from the bells, but from the heavens themselves, a deep, resonant peal, unlike any bell in the Vatican. The cardinals froze, because they knew. This was the sign. All eyes darted toward Cardinal Tagle, who was standing at the side of the balcony. His face was pale, his lips moving in silent prayer. Somewhere in the apostolic palace, a messenger was already running toward a guarded chamber, the chamber where the sealed letter was kept. The crowd felt it too, though they did not know what it meant. Mothers clutched their children. Pilgrims fell to their knees. Some cried out, "Miracle," others, "Warning," but all felt the same truth in their bones. Heaven was speaking, and then it happened. From above the colonnade, a single ray of light broke through the sky, not from the sun, but from a source no one could see. It struck the statue of Christ atop the basilica, making the cross in his hand blaze like fire. Gasps rose from the crowd, but the blaze did not fade. It grew. Pope Leo's voice trembled. He turned to the cardinals and whispered, though the microphones caught it, "It begins now." Inside the Vatican, The sealed letter was brought forth under heavy guard. 2 cardinals appointed by the Pope months earlier carried it to the balcony. The envelope bore a crimson wax seal in the shape of the Sacred Heart, and across it, in the Pope's own handwriting, 7 words: "For the hour when heaven strikes." The crowd watched, breathless, as the Pope held it aloft. But before he could break the seal, a sudden shadow passed over the square. The blazing light vanished, the sky turned a deep, unnatural red, and the bells of St. Peter's began to toll 13 times. Every cardinal knew the meaning. 13. The number tied to the apparitions of Fatima, the number that speaks of warning before chastisement. The Pope closed his eyes and broke the seal. The Pope unfolded the letter slowly. The parchment was aged, though it had been written only months before, the edges scorched as if touched by fire. Every stroke of the pen carried the weight of a soul who had wrestled with God in the night. The square was so silent that the rustle of paper seemed like thunder. Leo's eyes scanned the page, and for a moment, the entire Vatican seemed to hold its breath. His voice, low at first, began to read, "To my brothers in the College of Cardinals, and to the faithful scattered across the earth. The vision I received is not a prophecy, to be admired, but a verdict from heaven. The Church stands at the edge of a sword. One side gleams with glory, the other drips with blood." A shiver rippled through the crowd. Cardinals shifted uneasily, their crimson robes swaying in the rising wind. "The Lord has shown me the bride of Christ, torn by wolves wearing shepherd's clothing. Her wounds bleed not from the hands of the world, but from the hands of her own." Gasps. Some cardinals' eyes darted to one another, because everyone in that square knew there were factions, secret meetings behind closed doors, whispers of alliances that had nothing to do with the gospel. Therefore, the time for concealment is over. From this day, every shepherd who hides sin under the cloak of power will be stripped of his staff and his seat. Every altar built on ambition will fall. Every mouth that blesses in public yet curses in secret will be silenced. And I, as the vicar of Christ, will not hesitate to tear down the golden walls if they keep the bride from her bridegroom. The last sentence struck like a lightning bolt. Several cardinals visibly paled. A few clutched their pectoral crosses. The faithful in the square began to murmur, some in awe, others in fear. The Pope's voice grew stronger, each word a hammer. "You were chosen for this hour, not to protect yourselves, but to protect the truth. If you stand with the gospel, stand now. If you stand with the shadows, know that heaven will expose you, even if I do not." The final lines shook the foundations of the Curia. And when the purification begins, it will not end until the bride shines white again. This is the last warning before the flood. As he lowered the parchment, the wind roared through the square. The blazing cross atop the basilica ignited again, brighter than before, almost blinding. Pilgrims fell to their knees, sobbing, and then, in the midst of the crowd, a cry rose. "Look at the sky!" Every head turned upward, and there, piercing through the crimson clouds, a white dove descended. Its wings spread wide, gliding, in slow circles above the basilica. But as it passed overhead, its shadow on the ground was not the shape of a dove. It was the shape of a cross. The Pope crossed himself. Cardinal Tagle's eyes glistened with tears. But deep within the College of Cardinals, unseen to the crowd, a few faces remained like stone, their minds already calculating their next move in the war for the soul of the Church. The moment the Pope stepped back from the balcony, the war began. Behind the marble walls, cardinals broke into hushed, furious whispers, crimson robes brushing past each other like swords in the dark. Some swore loyalty to the Holy Father. Others vowed that no man, not even the Pope, would tear apart the order they had built in secret. Tagle walked among them, his face calm, but his heart pounding. He could feel it. The clash of powers was no longer hidden. Angels and demons, moving through the same hallways. In the Apostolic Library, an ancient door slammed shut. In the Secretariat of State, letters were burned before they could reach the Pope's desk, and in the chapel of the choir, a lone priest knelt, before the crucifix, weeping, because he knew the cleansing had begun. Outside, the faithful still knelt, eyes fixed on the blazing cross above the basilica. The sky rumbled, as if heaven itself was answering the Pope's call. The bride of Christ was entering the fire. And when she emerged, she would either be pure as gold or reduced to ashes. And, somewhere, in the depths of the Vatican, the first seal of heaven's judgment cracked open.